They thought she was just a single mom selling jam at a farmer's market, an easy target for their corrupt scheme, but they were blind to the commander hidden beneath the apron. What happens when a government bully picks a fight with someone trained for war? The morning sun felt warm on my face as I sat at my table. My hands, used to gripping a steering wheel far out at sea, carefully arranged jars of strawberry and apple jam. Here, at the farmer's market, the air smelled like fresh bread and cut flowers instead of salt water and diesel. This was my new life, my quiet life, the one I built for Sarah. She was over by the big oak tree, her bright yellow shirt a happy spot in the green grass, playing with her friend Lily. Seeing her laugh like that, free and safe, made all the hard parts worth it. It was why I traded the crisp, white uniform for paint-splattered aprons and the hum of engines for the cheerful chatter of market-goers. People started to arrive, baskets on their arms, smiles ready. Mrs. Gable from the bakery waved, her apron dusted with flour. Mr. Henderson, the grumpy vegetable man, grunted a greeting from next door. This was my community now. They knew me as the jam lady, the single mom working hard to give her daughter a good life. They didn't know about the other life, the one where I was known by rank and call sign, the one where decisions meant more than just choosing between peach and plum. That life was locked away, a different uniform hung in the back of a closet, medals tucked into a box. It was over. It had to be. For Sarah. The market filled up. Voices mixed with the sound of a guitar player strumming a happy tune. I talked about how much sugar I used, how I got the berries so bright, how Sarah helped stick on the label sometimes. It felt good, normal. So normal, I almost missed them at first. Two men. They weren't looking at the crafts or the food. They weren't dressed for a sunny Saturday. Dark suits, even though it was warm. They stood by the fountain, just watching. Not watching everyone, but watching my stall. Watching me. A little shiver ran down my back, like stepping out of the warm kitchen into a cold pantry. It was silly, probably. Just people taking a break, maybe waiting for someone. Lots of different folks came to the market. But the feeling stayed. A tiny, sharp point of worry. I forced myself to smile wider at a customer buying a jar of blueberry. My hand was steady as I made change, but inside, a little alarm bell had rung. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a long time, a sound that meant pay attention. I glanced over again. They were still there. One was tall and thin, with sharp eyes that seemed to take everything in. The other was shorter, thicker, and kept fiddling with his cufflink. They weren't talking to each other much, just looking at me. My chest felt a little tight. Was it just my old habits kicking in? Was I seeing danger where there was none, like when I was constantly looking for threats in crowded ports or unfamiliar cities? Sarah ran up then, holding a balloon someone had given her. "Mommy, can I have a cookie?" she asked, her eyes wide. My heart swelled. This is what mattered. Cookies, balloons, sunshine. I knelt down, hugged her close, breathing in the smell of her hair. "Of course, sweetie," I said, my voice maybe a little too bright. I looked back towards a fountain over her head. The men weren't looking at me now. They were looking at Sarah. That's when the chill went from a tiny shiver to a deep, frozen block in my stomach. Their faces were blank, not friendly like they were watching a child play, but assessing, like they were cataloging something. They weren't just watchers. They were observers with a purpose, and that purpose seemed to involve my daughter. The pleasant market noise faded, replaced by a low hum of danger. My hands, the ones that just minutes ago were counting change for jam, clenched into fists at my sides. The softness of the apron suddenly felt wrong, a disguise that was too flimsy. I needed to get Sarah. Now, I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes on them. They turned away then, back to watching the crowd generally, but I knew. They had marked us. They had seen Sarah, and the way they looked wasn't casual. It was deliberate. Who were they? What did they want? And why were they looking at a single mom and her little girl at a peaceful farmer's market? The sunshine suddenly felt cold. My safe haven felt exposed. The ghost of my old life wasn't a ghost at all. It felt like it was walking towards me in a dark suit. As the day went on, I tried to push the feeling away. More customers came. I sold more jam. I made jokes, I smiled. But a part of my mind was elsewhere, alert. I saw them 2 more times before the market closed. Once near the bookstall, pretending to look at old maps. Another time by the exit, standing near a big black car that looked very out of place among the dusty pickups and minivans. They weren't subtle if you knew how to look. And I knew how to look. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. They were here for a reason, and that reason was connected to me. But why? I was nobody important anymore. Just Sarah's mom. Wasn't I? Packing up felt different. The usual tiredness was mixed with a tense energy like a wire pulled too tight. I kept Sarah close, holding her hand tightly as we walked past the stalls. I scanned the faces in the crowd, looking for the sharp-eyed man, the one who fiddled with his cufflink. I didn't see them right away. Maybe they were gone. Maybe I was being silly, letting old fears creep back in. But as we reached my old, sensible car parked on the street outside, I saw the big black car pull slowly away from the curb nearby. It didn't speed off. It just drove slowly down the road, past my car, past us. I couldn't see the faces inside through the tinted windows, but I knew. I knew they were in there, and they knew where I was. The sense of peace I'd built here, jar by careful jar, felt fragile, threatened. The market sounds faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the black car's engine as it disappeared around the corner. They hadn't just watched me today. They had followed me out, and the quiet life I thought I had was about to get very, very loud. The feeling didn't go away when we left the market. It was like a shadow that clung to my car, following us all the way home. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I expected to see the big black car. I didn't, not exactly, but the feeling of being watched, of not being alone, stayed with me. Driving felt different. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. My eyes flicked constantly to side mirrors, checking corners, scanning the road ahead. It felt like being back on patrol, but with no backup, no command center, just me and Sarah in the passenger seat, singing along to a kid's song. Getting home didn't help. The quiet street seemed too quiet. The familiar front door felt less like a safe place and more like an exposed entrance. I rushed Sarah inside, locking the deadbolt, checking the windows. This wasn't me. I wasn't supposed to be jumpy like this. I was supposed to be the calm, normal mom who made jam and helped with homework. But the calm felt fake, like a thin sheet pulled over something rough and sharp underneath. Later that week, it got worse. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. They showed up, not at the market this time, but near Sarah's school. I saw the tall, thin man standing across the street as I picked her up. He wasn't hiding. He was just there, watching the school gate. When he saw me see him, he didn't look away. He held my gaze for just a moment before turning and walking slowly down the block. It was a message, a clear, cold message that they knew where Sarah spent her days. My heart hammered against my ribs. This crossed a line. The market was one thing, my home another, but her school? That was sacred ground. Fear, hot and sharp, mixed with a different feeling, one I hadn't let myself feel in years, controlled, focused rage. They had picked the wrong person to try and scare by going near her child. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Not really. The next day, they came to my house. I was in the small garden, trying to weed, trying to feel normal. A dark sedan, not the black car from the market, but similar, pulled up to the curb. The two men from the market got out. They walked up the path slowly, like they owned the place. My hands, covered in dirt, trembled for a second, then grew steady. I stood up, wiping my hands on my pants, making myself look small, confused. The jam-making mom. They stopped a few feet away. The tall one did the talking. His voice was polite, almost soft, which made it even more chilling. "Mrs. Jones?" he asked, even though he clearly knew who I was. I nodded, trying to look unsure. "Yes." He smiled then, the same thin smile from the market. "We just have a few questions for you. Nothing to worry about." He held up a badge, but too quickly for me to read it clearly. It looked official, like the ones police or government people use. "Questions?" I asked, making my voice sound a little shaky. "About what?" I just sell jam." The shorter man chuckled, a low, dry sound. "We know what you sell, Mrs. Jones," he said. "We're more interested in what else you might know. About certain activities, shipments, deliveries." Shipments? Deliveries? What were they talking about? I made my face look blank, like I didn't understand. "I don't know anything about that," I said, shaking my head. "I haven't been involved in anything like that." The tall man leaned forward slightly. His eyes were like chips of ice. "We have information, Mrs. Jones. Information suggesting you have connections, that you've been useful to certain parties involved in the movement of sensitive items through this area." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "We understand people sometimes do things for money or for protection. We can offer protection, Mrs. Jones, and perhaps other benefits, if you cooperate." My mind was racing. Sensitive items? Movement through the area? They thought I was some kind of smuggler or helper for criminals operating near the market. It was insane. Completely, utterly wrong. But their faces were serious. They truly believed it. They had mistaken me for someone who fit that description, someone involved in something shady happening around here. Maybe it was someone who looked like me, or someone with a similar past connection to the area. The tall man gestured vaguely towards the town. Things come in, things go out. Sometimes people with the right skills, the right contacts, can make that process smoother. He was talking about my skills. My real skills. Did they know something? Or were they just guessing, throwing out words hoping something would stick? No, they seemed too sure. They had clearly gotten some bad information, pieced together clues about someone, and landed, disastrously for them, on me. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but firm. "I'm just a mother. I make jam. I don't have any contacts or skills like that." The short man stepped closer. His polite smile was gone. "Everyone has skills, Mrs. Jones," he said, his voice losing its soft edge. "And everyone has vulnerabilities. We know about your daughter, Sarah, a lovely child." He paused. "It would be a shame if anything disrupted her life. Wouldn't it?" That was it. The line wasn't just crossed. It was obliterated. My breath caught in my throat, but not from fear. From the cold, hard decision that formed in my mind. They thought they were dealing with a scared civilian they could bully. They thought they had found a weak point in Sarah. They had no idea. The jam-making mom disappeared. In her place, something else settled in, something sharp and ready. They wanted someone with skills. They wanted someone with contacts. They had found her. They had made a terrible, terrible mistake. And I knew, in that moment, that I wouldn't just defend myself anymore. I would fight back, not as the jam lady, but as the woman I truly was beneath this carefully built disguise. They had targeted the wrong mother, and they were about to find out just how wrong. When the dark car finally drove away, a heavy silence settled over my little garden. The cheerful colors of the flowers seemed too bright, too innocent, for the cold fear that had just been spoken aloud. They knew about Sarah. That wasn't a guess. It was a statement, a clear threat wrapped in a polite warning. My hands, still dirty from pulling weeds, stopped shaking. Instead, a different kind of feeling took over. It was cold, clear, and sharp like a blade being honed. It wasn't the panic I might have expected, but a focused calm. The part of me that had been sleeping for years, the part that had commanded ships and made life-or-death decisions, was wide awake. They thought they were talking to a scared, unprotected mom. They thought mentioning my child would make me fold, make me tell them whatever lies they seemed to believe about me. They were wrong. So completely, terribly wrong. Mentioning Sarah didn't scare me into submission. It activated something deep inside. It flipped a switch from civilian mode to something else entirely. My mind, which had been filled with worries about jam prices and school permission slips, was suddenly calculating angles, assessing threats, running scenarios like a computer program starting up after a long sleep. I went inside, the garden forgotten. The house felt different now. Not just a home, but a place that needed to be secured. I checked the locks again, not just turning the bolt, but examining the frames, thinking about weak points. I walked through the rooms, my eyes scanning, not for dust bunnies, but for anything out of place, anything that shouldn't be there. I knew enough to know that people who threaten you don't always do it face to face. Sometimes they leave listening devices or cameras, small things you'd never notice unless you were looking. I didn't find anything, but the awareness was there, a low hum of caution in my ears. That night, putting Sarah to bed felt different too. I read her favorite story, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, but a part of my mind was already working, planning. I sat by her bed for a long time after she fell asleep, just watching her chest rise and fall, listening to her soft breathing. Protecting this little life was the only thing that mattered. And to protect her, I had to understand the danger. Who were these men? What was this operation they thought I was part of? And who did they think I was, really? I pulled out an old map of the town, one I used to plan routes for farmers market deliveries. But now I looked at it with different eyes. I saw roads, sure, but I also saw escape routes, blind spots, places where surveillance would be easy or hard. I thought about their car, the way they stood, the words they used. They were professional, but not top tier. Government, maybe, but maybe a part of it that worked in the shadows, maybe even a corrupt part using government power for their own bad business. The shipments they mentioned, what were they moving? And through here, it didn't fit anything I knew about this quiet town. The pressure didn't stop. The next day, the black car was parked down the street from my house when I took Sarah to school. Not right in front, but close enough to see. A silent watch. When I went to the grocery store later, I saw one of the men walking down an aisle I had just passed. He didn't look at me directly, but I felt his eyes on my back. They were letting me know they were always there. Always watching. It was a classic tactic meant to make you feel trapped, scared, to wear you down until you gave them what they wanted, even if you didn't have it. But it wasn't working the way they expected. Instead of feeling trapped, I felt ready. The fear for Sarah was a powerful fuel, but the old training provided the engine. My mind was sharper than it had been in years. I started observing everyone around me, noticing details, faces, cars, patterns of movement that most people would ignore. I wasn't just trying to avoid them. I was starting to gather my own information. I needed to know their routine, their numbers, their weak points. I went back to the market midweek, not to sell, but to walk around just like a regular shopper. I wore a different hat, different clothes, hoping to blend in. I saw no sign of the men in suits, but I felt eyes on me more than once. Maybe they had others watching the market, people who looked more normal. As I walked near the edge of the market area, where the delivery trucks sometimes parked, I saw a van that seemed to be waiting. Two men inside, looking bored, but their eyes scanned the area constantly. They didn't look like they were waiting for vegetables. A little later, near the back of the market, by the storage sheds, I saw a brief interaction. A man I didn't recognize, wearing a work uniform, passed a small, dark bag to another man who quickly put it in the back of a plain car. It was over in seconds, smooth, practiced. My heart gave a little jolt. Was that it? Was that the kind of shipment they were talking about? Small, quick transfers happening right here, under the noise and bustle of the market? And did they think I was somehow involved in helping make that happen? It was a piece of the puzzle, small but important. It showed me what their operation might look like on the ground. Standing there, pretending to look at pottery, my mind was connecting dots. The market, the shipments, their belief that I had connections and skills. They must think I was some kind of go-between, using the market as a cover, maybe using old contacts from my past life in some twisted way they imagined. The absurdity of it was almost funny, but the danger was very real. They were convinced I was part of this, and people who are convinced of the wrong thing can be very dangerous. As I walked away from the market, the sun felt warm again, but the world had changed. It wasn't just a friendly place anymore. It was a potential stage for something secret and bad. And I was caught in the middle of it. They had pulled me in because of a mistake, but now I was in it. Running wasn't an option. They would find us. Hiding wouldn't work. They were already watching. There was only one way out that kept Sarah safe and my conscience clear. I had to take the fight to them. They had made me a target, but they had no idea I was armed. Not with a gun, but with something far more precise and dangerous. Training, discipline, and a mother's fierce, protective love. My old life had taught me how to fight battles. It was time to remember everything. Stepping out the front door felt different that morning. It wasn't just leaving the house. It was beginning a mission. The fear was still there, a low hum, but it was layered now with a cold focus, a sense of purpose that felt strangely familiar. The skills I'd packed away like old uniforms were coming back to me, sharp and ready. My mind was a map, plotting routes, calculating risks, identifying objectives. They wanted to play games in the shadows? Fine. I knew those shadows better than they did. My first move seemed simple, a trip to the public library. On the surface, I was just a mom looking for books for her daughter. But my real work started the moment I left the driveway. I drove a slightly longer route, watching for tails. I checked my mirrors constantly, using techniques that felt as natural as breathing, looking at reflections in shop windows, checking for cars that appeared in multiple places they shouldn't. I didn't spot the black car or the sedan right away, but the awareness was there, a heightened state of alert that felt both exhausting and oddly energizing. At the library, I wasn't browsed the kids section. I was in the local history archives, looking at old town records, maps from years ago, anything that might shed light on the area's past, its connections, maybe even something that could explain who they thought I was or what kind of operation was happening here. I scanned old newspaper articles, looking for reports of strange events, focusing on the time period before I moved here, but also keeping an eye out for anything recent that seemed out of place. While I was there, I also used a public computer, not to check email, but to do searches. I used careful, general terms at first: local shipping, area transport, small cargo planes nearby. Then I got a little more specific, thinking about the brief exchange I'd seen at the market. Unauthorized deliveries, private airfields near town name. It was slow going, and most of it was just normal information, but I was looking for tiny details, things that didn't quite fit, names or company names that popped up unexpectedly. The men didn't show up in the library, but I felt their presence outside. When I left, I saw the tall man sitting on a bench across the street, pretending to read a newspaper. He didn't look up, but I saw his eyes flick towards me in the reflection of a shop window as I passed. They weren't just watching my house anymore. They were watching me when I was out and about, seeing where I went, who I interacted with. They were tightening the net, but I was using their surveillance. By seeing where they were, I was learning their habits, their schedules, who was watching me when. It was like a strange, dangerous dance, and I was learning their steps so I could lead. I went to the park with Sarah later that day, ostensibly for her to play. While she was on the swings, laughing, my eyes were scanning the perimeter, noticing cars parked on the street, people sitting on benches who seemed a little too still. It was exhausting, being two people at once. The cheerful mom pushing a swing and the vigilant commander assessing threats. My research at the library gave me a few small leads. A few online articles about zoning disputes near a small, private airfield about 20 miles outside of town. Mentions of increased air traffic there years ago, which had apparently stopped. It was thin, but it was a thread. Could that airfield be connected to the shipments they were talking about? Could they think I had something to do with it because of my past life, my knowledge of planes and transport? It was the only thing that made a tiny bit of sense in their twisted view of me. The next day, I decided to take a bigger risk. I drove out towards where the old airfield was marked on the map. I told Sarah that we were going for a long drive to see the countryside, which wasn't entirely a lie. As we got closer to the area, the houses thinned out, replaced by fields and woods. I drove slowly, keeping an eye on the rearview mirror, listening to the radio, trying to seem like nothing more than a mom and daughter on a Sunday drive. I found a road that led to the airfield. It was small, mostly hidden by trees, with a rusty sign. I didn't drive down it. Instead, I parked the car a little way off the main road, near a small, overgrown track that looked like it went into the woods. I told Sarah I wanted to look at some flowers and got out, taking her hand. We walked a little way along the track, just into the edge of the woods, far enough to be out of sight of the road, but close enough for me to observe without being seen. Through the trees, I could just see a part of the airfield fence, a small hangar, and a section of the runway. It looked quiet, almost deserted. But as I watched, a car drove up to the hangar. Not the black sedan, but another car I hadn't seen before. Two men got out. They went inside the hangar, coming out a few minutes later carrying a heavy-looking, dark case. They put in the car, got in, and drove away quickly. My heart pounded. That case. It looked similar to the bag I'd seen exchanged at the market, just bigger. This was it. This was likely their transfer point, using this quiet, forgotten airfield. And seeing it, seeing the quick, secret exchange, made the threat feel even more real. They weren't just talking. They were doing something illegal, something they clearly didn't want anyone to know about. As the car drove away, I scanned the area again. And then I saw it. Hidden in the trees on the other side of the airfield road, almost perfectly camouflaged, was another vehicle. It wasn't a car. It looked like a utility truck, the kind someone doing repair work might use. But perched on its roof, partly hidden by branches, I saw the unmistakable shape of a camera. They weren't just using the airfield. They were watching it. And the people involved in the exchange hadn't seemed bothered by the utility truck. A cold realization washed over me. They weren't just running an operation. They were running an operation that was also under surveillance. And they knew about the surveillance, maybe even controlled it. Were the men who visited me the same ones watching the airfield? Or were they a different group? Maybe the ones doing the watching who thought I was connected to the people using the airfield. I quickly led Sarah back to the car, my mind spinning. I had confirmed their activity and found a potential surveillance point. But I had also realized the situation was more complicated, more layered than I first thought. There wasn't just one group here. There were at least two, maybe more, moving in the shadows, and I was now stuck in the middle of their dangerous game. I had gathered information, but I had also just put myself in even greater danger. The stakes had just been raised higher than I could have imagined. Finding that camera hidden in the woods near the airfield felt like finding a secret message in a bottle. It wasn't just the people with the case who were doing something hidden. Someone else was watching them. My brain, the part that used to solve complex problems under pressure, immediately started sorting things out. Why would someone watch that airfield? Were they police? Another group trying to steal whatever was in those cases? Or were they connected to the men who kept bothering me? The puzzle had just gotten much bigger, and the pieces didn't fit together easily. I thought about the two men who visited my house. The tall one with the cold eyes, the shorter one who talked about Sarah. They seemed official, but their methods felt not quite right for real police. Threatening a child? That felt more like thugs with badges, or maybe a part of the government that didn't play by the rules. They thought I was involved in whatever was happening at the airfield, helping move those cases. But if they were watching the airfield, why didn't they just grab the people there? Why come after me, the jam lady? Unless they thought I was higher up, someone pulling strings, someone they couldn't catch red-handed at the site. I needed to know more about them. Just seeing their faces wasn't enough. I needed names, maybe where they worked, who they reported to, but I couldn't just look them up in a phone book. This required a different kind of looking. I started spending more time in places where I might spot them without them seeing me too easily. The town square, the park, places where they might watch the area. I dressed differently, wore different hats, things to change how I looked just slightly. I was learning to be a ghost in my own town. One afternoon, I saw the dark sedan parked a few blocks from my house. Nobody was inside, but I saw a fast food cup left on the dashboard. Simple thing, right? But my mind grabbed onto it. People have habits. They eat, they drink. Do they always go to the same places? Do they leave things in the car? These little details can build a picture. I also noticed the car itself. Was it a government car? It looked like it, plain, dark color. But it had a small dent on the back bumper, a little scratch on the driver's side door handle. Things that made it unique, identifiable. I couldn't use my old contacts directly, not without putting them in danger or revealing where I was. But I could use the knowledge they had given me. I knew how government agencies worked, but didn't work together. I knew how certain types of operations were run, and I knew that people in those kinds of jobs, even if they were trying to be secret, sometimes left little trails behind, like the kind of coffee cup they bought, or the specific way they parked their car, or the times of day they seemed to be most active. I started keeping a quiet record in my head. When I saw the sedan, where it was, what time. If I saw the men, what they were wearing, who they were with. It felt slow, like trying to fill a bathtub with a tiny cup, but every little bit of information was a piece of the puzzle. I needed to figure out if the men who threatened me were the same people watching the airfield, or if they were two different groups entirely, maybe even enemies, both somehow thinking I was connected to the activity at the airfield. The strain of this double life was starting to show. Smiling at Sarah, helping with her homework, making jam, it felt like I was acting all the time. My mind was always on the danger, always watching, always planning. Sleep was hard to come by. Every late-night noise outside made me jump. I knew this couldn't go on forever. I was pushing myself too hard, and that made me less safe, not more. But the thought of not doing anything, of just waiting for them to make their next move was unbearable. Not when they had threatened Sarah. One day I got lucky. I saw the short, thick man with a cufflink fiddling by himself near the park. He was on his phone, talking quietly, looking annoyed. He walked past a store with a big glass window, and I saw his reflection. He took something out of his pocket while he was talking, a small, dark wallet. It was just for a second, but I saw a corner of something tucked inside. It looked like a badge or an ID card holder. It was the same kind a tall man had flashed quickly in my house. This was important. It wasn't just one of them with an ID. They both had one. It suggested they were working together and that they likely belonged to some kind of official group, even if they were using their power for bad reasons. It didn't tell me which group, but it confirmed they weren't just random criminals pretending to be cops. They had some kind of authority, which made them even more dangerous. As he walked away, I felt a shiver, not of fear this time, but of grim certainty. They had government ID. They were involved in moving illegal shipments through the airfield. They were watching the airfield themselves, or maybe working with the people who were. And they thought I was somehow connected to it all, despite the fact that I made jam for a living. The picture was starting to form, but it was a twisted, ugly picture. It showed a corrupt group using their power for crime, a group that had mistakenly decided I was the key to their operation. And knowing they had real authority, even if they used it wrongly, made their mistake about me terrifying. They wouldn't give up easily. They believed their own bad information, and that belief was about to lead them to do something very, very dangerous. The trap was sprung on a Tuesday. Not at the market, not near the school, but in the small, quiet parking lot behind the town's little post office. I had just mailed a letter to my mother, keeping up the appearance of a normal life, when the dark sedan pulled in quickly, blocking me in. The two men got out, their faces hard, no more fake smiles. This wasn't a social call. This was them making their move. Mrs. Jones, the tall one, said, his voice flat and cold. "We need you to come with us." Now, the short one stood a little behind him, his eyes flicking around the empty parking lot, making sure no one else was near. My heart leaped into my throat, a sudden, sharp spike of adrenaline, but the years of training took over instantly. My body went still, but my mind went into overdrive. Assess, reactivate. I held up my hands a little, trying to look scared and confused, buying myself a second. Come with you? Why? I told you, I don't know anything. I backed away slowly toward the back of my car. They took a step towards me, thinking I was just retreating in fear. Big mistake. As the tall one reached out for my arm, I moved. It wasn't a panic scramble, but a quick, efficient shift of weight, learned and practiced 1,000 times. I ducked under his arm, using his forward movement against him. I didn't try to hurt him badly, just to get past. As I slipped by, my elbow came up just enough to connect with his side, a sharp, focused jab that made him grunt and falter. The short one moved to cut me off, but I was already moving. I used the back of my own car as cover, putting a solid object between me and him. He came around the side, quicker than the tall one. He grabbed for me, his hand reaching for my shoulder. I twisted away, low and fast, just like learning to avoid a line of fire. His hand grabbed air. As I straightened up, my hand shot out, not in a punch, but a quick, open palm strike to the side of his head, just below the ear. It wasn't meant to knock him out, but to daze him, to buy me another precious second. He stumbled back, shaking his head. The tall one was recovering, turning towards me, surprise and anger on his face. "She's not just a mom," he yelled, his voice losing all pretense of politeness. No, I wasn't. Not right now. Right now, I was something else. I didn't have a weapon, and I didn't want a prolonged fight. My goal was to escape, to get back to Sarah. I looked around the parking lot. My car was blocked. Running down the alleyway would be too exposed. The post office building was my best bet. Maybe get inside where there were people. The tall man lunged for me again. This time, I didn't just evade. I used his momentum. As he came forward, I stepped to the side, grabbed his arm just above the elbow, and pulled hard, using his own weight to spin him past me. As he went by, off balance, I gave him a strong shove toward his car. He stumbled and hit the side of the sedan with a thud. The short man was coming at me again, anger in his eyes. He pulled something from his jacket, a small black item. Not a gun, but maybe a taser or some kind of restraint device. He aimed it at me. I reacted instantly. There was a stack of empty mail crates by the back door of the post office. I kicked the bottom one hard. The whole stack wobbled and crashed down between me and him, creating a sudden, noisy barrier. He swore and had to stop, the crates blocking his path for a moment. That was my chance. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted for the back door of the post office, pulled the handle locked. Of course. Plan B. There was a small gap between the post office building and the next one, a narrow passage leading to the street. It was tight, but I was small and fast. I heard them yelling behind me, scrambling over the fallen crates. I darted into the narrow passage. It smelled of old paper and dust. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind me, closer now. They were through the crates. I burst out onto the sidewalk on the next street over, not caring who saw me, needing to disappear into the normal flow of people. I didn't look back until I was around the next corner, breathing hard, trying to blend in with shoppers. I risked a quick glance back down the street. I saw the two men come out of the passage, looking around, trying to spot me. They looked angry, surprised, and confused. They hadn't expected this. They had expected an easy pickup. They had expected a scared mom. As I walked away, my heart was still racing, but my mind was already processing. I had gotten away. I had shown them I wouldn't be an easy target. But they knew now. They knew I wasn't who they thought I was. Or maybe they were even more convinced I was something dangerous because of how I reacted. Suddenly, I remembered something. When a short man had stumbled against his car, something had fallen from his pocket onto the ground next to the vehicle before he got his balance back. In the rush, I hadn't stopped, but I had seen it, a small, dark object. It might have been his wallet again, or it might have been something else. Something important. They would be looking for me everywhere now. The simple life was over. The disguise was blown. They knew I could handle myself, which meant they would come harder next time. But I had escaped, and maybe, just maybe, I had left them with less than they arrived with. The fight had just gotten real, and I was now officially in the open. And that object that fell, I had to know what it was. It could be the key to everything. It could tell me who they really were and what they were planning next. It was a risk, but I had to go back for it. The information was worth the danger. Getting away from the post office was just the first step. The bigger risk was going back. My heart was still pounding from the fight, but my mind was clear. That object the short man dropped, it could be nothing or it could be everything. It felt like a hook had been set, and I had to pull the line. I waited a few blocks away, hidden, watching the post office parking lot from a distance. The dark sedan was still there. The men were moving around, looking frustrated, maybe talking on their phones. They weren't searching the ground. Not yet. Waiting felt like an eternity. Every car that drove by, every person walking on the sidewalk, made me tense up. I needed them to leave. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably only 20 minutes, the two men got back into the sedan. They didn't speed off. They drove slowly out of the parking lot, turning away from where I was hidden. I watched them until they were out of sight, counting seconds, making sure they weren't just circling the block. When I was sure they were gone, I moved. Walking back felt different this time. Not like I was being hunted, but like I was the one on the hunt. My eyes scanned everything, rooftops, windows, parked cars, looking for any sign they had left someone behind to watch. The parking lot was empty now, quiet under the afternoon sun. I walked carefully towards the spot where the short man had stumbled by his car, my eyes on the ground. And there it was. Small, dark, lying partly under the edge of a parked car. It wasn't a wallet. It was a device that looked like a tough, small phone, but different. Secure communication. And next to it, partly folded, was a small card. I snatched them both up quickly, my fingers brushing against the rough asphalt. I didn't stay. I got back in my car and drove away, not home, but to a quiet spot I knew by the river, a place where I could think. Looking at the device, and the card felt like holding pieces of a secret. The card wasn't a full ID, just a part, but it had a name and a seal that looked official, but for a section I didn't fully recognize, something about special assets. The device was locked, but years of working with different types of secure communications gave me an idea of how it might work, what kind of information it might hold. It was encrypted, scrambled, so no one could read it easily. But I knew people who knew how to unscramble things like this. People from my old life. This was the moment. I could try to disappear again, run with Sarah, but they would likely just keep looking. Or I could use this. This device likely had their plans, their communications, maybe even proof of what they were doing and who they worked for. It was risky, reaching out to my old world. It meant opening a door I had carefully closed. But protecting Sarah meant using every tool I had, even the ones I had put away forever. I drove to a different town, far enough away that I wasn't worried about being seen. I found a payphone, old technology, but safe because it wasn't connected to me. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, a number I thought I had forgotten, but my fingers remembered. It rang for a long time. Just when I thought no one would answer, a voice came on the line. Cautious, professional. Status? The voice said. A code word. I took a deep breath. Condition read. I replied, using another code word, one that meant extreme danger, personal and operational. Intel acquired. Requires immediate secure handling. Repeat, condition read. There was a pause on the other end, a sudden sharpness in the voice. Identify. I gave my old call sign, a name I hadn't spoken aloud since I left the service. Commander. I hesitated for a second, then finished. It felt strange, the two parts of me colliding. Commander Jones. The voice on the other end changed, a hint of surprise, then grim understanding. Understood, Commander. Stand by for secure contact. Do not use this line again. The line clicked dead. It was done. I had reached out. I had used the code words, my rank, my old identity. Help was coming, but it would come in the form of the world I had left behind, the world of classified information, secure channels, and operations. I went back to my car, the secure device, and the partial ID card feeling heavy in my pocket. Now I just had to wait for the secure contact. And while I waited, I looked at the device again, trying to figure out anything else I could from its outside. And then I saw it, a tiny symbol on the back, almost invisible. It matched a symbol I had seen on the side of the utility truck watching the airfield. They were connected. The men who visited me and the people watching the airfield operation were working for the same group. And they thought I was the key. A message came later, not on my regular phone, but through a coded app that suddenly activated on an old tablet I kept hidden away. It was a secure channel, the kind the Navy used. A string of numbers and letters. Decoded, it gave me instructions, a time, a place, and a person to meet. It was happening. The wheels were turning. They believed my story about the intel acquired. They were sending someone to receive it. But it also meant they believed I was still somehow operational, still Commander Jones, not just Sarah's mom. I spent the rest of the day ensuring Sarah was safe, making arrangements without alarming her. This next part would be dangerous, and I couldn't have her anywhere near it. I told her she would be having a special sleepover at a friend's house, making it sound like a fun adventure. It was the hardest acting I had done yet, smiling while my stomach was tied in knots. That night, alone in my quiet house after Sarah was safely at her friend's, I studied the instructions again. The meeting place was outside of town, a secluded spot. The time was late. It was a classic exchange setup. They expected me to bring the device, the intel. I would bring it, yes, but I would also bring the truth and the trap I had helped set based on their own messages. I knew, with a cold certainty, that the men who had threatened me would be there. They would want that device back, and they would want answers. This was the final confrontation. It was time to stop running and hiding, and to face them head-on, not as the scared mother they thought they could break, but as the commander who had used their own mistake to bring their world crashing down. The night air was cool and still as I drove towards the meeting place. My hand was steady on the wheel, my mind sharp and focused. This wasn't the farmer's market. This was the kind of darkness I understood. The meeting spot was an old, empty parking lot near a closed-down factory, the kind of place where shadows hid easily. I arrived early, just like I had been taught, to assess the area, look for anything out of place. My eyes scanned the darkness, searching for hidden cars, movement, anything that didn't belong. I wasn't alone. From my contact's coded message, I knew legitimate authorities, alerted by my condition red call, and the initial information passed through secure channels, would be nearby, watching. My job was to draw the corrupt agents out, get them to show their hand, and provide the solid evidence my contact needed to move in officially. The secure device I found was in my pocket, the key piece of proof. I parked in the middle of the lot, leaving my car lights off. I got out and stood by the door waiting. Every sense was on high alert. The wind blowing through the empty factory windows sounded like whispers. The distant hum of the town felt miles away. This was my stage, set for a final act. Then headlights. 2 sets. They approached slowly, cautiously, one car pulling into the lot entrance, the other circling to block the exit. The dark sedan was one of them. A different, larger SUV was the other. My heart gave a quick, hard thump, but I stayed still, projecting calm, like a decoy waiting to be sprung. The dark sedan parked about 50 feet away. The 2 men, the tall one and the shorter one, got out. They didn't look confident this time. They looked angry and wary. The SUV also stopped, and 2 more figures got out, bigger, maybe security. This was their team. The tall man walked towards me, slowly. The shorter one stayed back by the sedan, watching the edges of the lot. "Mrs. Jones," the tall man said, his voice low. No politeness, just hard steel. "You shouldn't have done that." "Done what?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Ran away when you tried to grab me in a parking lot." He stopped a few feet away. "You know what we mean. The device. The information." "Oh," I said. "That." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the secure device, holding it up just enough for him to see in the dim light. "You mean this?" His eyes fixed on the device. Greed, relief, and suspicion warred on his face. "Give it to me," he ordered, holding out his hand. "What?" I asked. "So I can go back to making jam and pretending none of this happened? You threatened my daughter. You thought I was someone I'm not. You operate some kind of illegal shipment ring through the old airfield, and you use government authority to scare people." His face hardened. "You know too much." "I know enough," I said. "I know you thought I was involved because of some bad information. Maybe someone with a similar background? Someone who actually uses the market as a cover? You chased the wrong lead, and now you're caught." He took a step towards me, his hand going inside his jacket. "Give me the device, and maybe we can make this easier." "It's already done," I said, my voice clear. "The information from this device, everything on it, has already been sent to people who will use it properly." His eyes widened for just a second in disbelief and rage. He lunged for me. That's when the lights hit. From the edges of the parking lot, powerful spotlights flared on, blinding the agents. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer fast. Figures in tactical gear, the legitimate authorities alerted by my contact, swarmed into the lot from the shadows. It was chaos. The agents were caught completely by surprise. They yelled. Some tried to run for their cars, others froze. The tall man who had lunged at me stopped, blinking in the sudden light. He looked from me to the approaching figures, his face a mask of defeat and fury. "You," he spat at me. "The jam lady? You did this." "I did," I said, standing tall now, no longer pretending to be scared. "You targeted a single mother. You should have checked her service record." More officers arrived, surrounding the corrupt agents and their team. They were ordered to put their hands up to get on the ground. The fight was over almost before it began, ended by surprise and overwhelming force, just like in the training manuals. As the agents were being handcuffed, a figure I didn't recognize, clearly in charge of the arresting officers, approached me cautiously. Behind him, I saw a familiar face, my contact, a trusted friend from my past life, giving me a brief, almost imperceptible nod. The leader of the corrupt group, a man I hadn't seen before, but who must have been in the SUV, was being roughly led away. He twisted his head to look at me, his eyes burning with resentment. "You won't get away with this," he snarled, his voice rough. "Nobody takes us down.